Is this case closed? Is the race over? We're seeing multiple polling data showing double-digit gains for Mr. Mamdani. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think for a while it's been clear that Zohran Mamdani is on track to win the mayoral race in New York City. And I don't think anything we've seen over the past couple of weeks in terms of the early vote has changed that view at all. I think it's clear that Andrew Cuomo has a bit of a ceiling, and I haven't seen any indication, any movement in polling that has changed that over the past couple of weeks. So I do think we're on track for a Mamdani win.
Do we read into the massive surge in early voting to benefit Zohran Mamdani, suggesting that it might be younger people who are getting in line, or is that not clear tonight?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I do think that from what we've seen in the age breakouts, there have been more younger people in the recent surge of early voting than maybe the initial numbers had shown. And I do think that that should likely favor Mamdani. Obviously, a spike in younger voter turnout was what helped him win the Democratic primary several months ago, so that should benefit him. But I don't think ultimately this changes fundamentally our view of the race, which is that Mamdani is the favorite to win.
Understood. Erin, I'd like to ask you about the gubernatorial races, and we can start with Virginia here. We've got Virginia and New Jersey, of course, in the balance. And speaking of early voting, we saw an enormous surge in Fairfax County in northern Virginia, as you know all too well from what we understand beyond some of the numbers we saw in the presidential race. How might that impact results for what many see as a win for Democrat Abigail Spanberger?
Yeah, so Fairfax is a pretty deep blue county at this point, and so high turnout there should favor Spanberger. But from the beginning, I think it's been clear that Spanberger was the favorite to win this race, and now it's really just a question of by how much of a margin. On average, she is leading Winsome Sears by about 10 points, and that wouldn't surprise me if she ended up winning by around that margin. But I do think that certainly there's more intrigue in the attorneys general race further down the ballot. And if the Republican incumbent there, Jason Miyares, is able to pull out an upset, I think Spanberger will have to win by less than 10 points.
Fascinating. All right. To the extent that the government shutdown impacts this race, Erin, what do you think about this idea? Because there are so many federal workers in a state like Virginia that, of course, borders Washington, D.C. Is this going to motivate Democrats or Republicans one way or the other?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I do think this was certainly a significant factor in Terry McAuliffe's win back in 2013. There was, of course, a government shutdown at that point as well. And that allowed McAuliffe to kind of break the streak of Virginia voting for the opposing party that sat in the White House during their gubernatorial election. However, I do think that views of the shutdown are pretty baked in along party lines. And among independents, we see that more independents blame Republicans over Democrats for the shutdown. So if anything, that should help Democrats on the ballot next week. But I think ultimately, you know, in Virginia, it was clear from the beginning that Democrats would be favored here. Obviously, Virginia has a huge population of federal workers who have been affected from the beginning of the year by cuts from DOGE and reductions in forces as well. And that is certainly something that I think has energized Democratic turnout.
New Jersey's a different story, isn't it? We're looking at, based on the most recent polling from Emerson College, a 1-point race. Erin, how are you looking at New Jersey, and what would this mean for these two candidates who have been in a knockdown, drag-out fight?
Yeah, I think that Emerson poll that we saw was a bit of an outlier of recent polling that we have seen in that race. On average, the Democrat Mikey Sherrill has been leading by around mid-single digits. And I think this race is going to be closer than the Virginia race, which may be a surprise to a lot of people. But we have to remember Kamala Harris won both Virginia and New Jersey by 6 points. So they are pretty similar states in terms of partisanship at this point. And of course, New Jersey has a recent history of electing Republican governors, and they haven't had a governor from the same party serve more than 2 terms in a row since, I believe, the 50s. And so it would not be a huge surprise if Chitterelli pulled out a win. Now, I do think that Sherrill is the clear favorite ultimately, but this is a closer race than the Virginia one.
Donald Trump has weighed in this case on behalf of Jack Chitterelli, and he has really seized on energy prices as the issue in this campaign. I don't know if you agree with him on that, Erin, but what's the Trump factor in New Jersey?
Yeah, I think the Trump factor is interesting. We saw that he made significant inroads in 2024 in New Jersey, particularly
Yeah.
in some of the inner suburbs around New York City with minority voters. And so Chitterelli is really banking on being able to replicate those gains that Trump made in North Jersey while drawing on his strength in South Jersey. But, at the end of the day, this is still a state that Trump lost ultimately. And so Cheryl has been really focused on tying Chitterelli to Trump and saying that he won't break with the president in any way, which he has done really not a lot to dissuade anyone from that view. In a debate with Cheryl earlier this month, he said that he graded Trump as with an A rating on his presidency so far. And so I do think that ultimately New Jersey is still a light blue state, and it would be difficult to win without creating a little bit of daylight between yourself and the incumbent president, who is still unpopular. Even, I will say, the Democratic governor, Phil Murphy, is also unpopular and is roughly around the same level as Trump. But I still do think Cheryl is favored at the end of the day.
I have to ask you about California and Prop 50. The money is incredible here. $120 million raised on behalf of the proposition to redistrict the state, to redraw the congressional map. This is something, of course, that's been promoted by Gavin Newsom. We'll find out Tuesday night. But that, I believe, 3-to-1 spending does give us a sense of where this is going. Erin, is it going to be a blowout?
I think it is on track to win by a pretty healthy margin. I mean, the latest polling we have seen has showed that supporters for Prop 50 is around the same number of folks who voted for Kamala Harris in the state, who, of course, won it by double digits. And so it does seem like this is likely to pass, in which case this would give Democrats an opportunity at flipping 3 to 5 seats in California, and also shores up several of their own vulnerable incumbents. So as we're talking about all of this mid-decade redistricting, California is the most important state that could redraw their map just because of the sheer number of pickups that Democrats could make.
We were just showing a map of the country and the number of states that are either in the process of or considering redistricting. Erin, what happens at the Cook Political Report if all of these states redraw their congressional maps? You guys are going to need a Ouija board or something to get through this midterm.
Yeah, well, it really does put things on hold a little bit when we don't know which of these states are going to have new maps by the time we get to 2026. Of course, we've seen new maps have already passed in Texas and Missouri and North Carolina, and now, as of this morning, Ohio. Those are all maps that will benefit Republicans to varying degrees, which is why Democrats are so set on making sure Prop 50 passes in California.